I'm telling you, emotions are not the enemy. They don't show up to destroy logic, but to clarify what you haven't had the courage to face. The problem isn't the emotion. The problem is your refusal to engage with it. Every time you feel angry, disappointed, let down, or powerless, it's not a weakness. It's living data. And if you're aware enough to ask, what is this emotion trying to tell me? You begin to enter a different state of awareness where emotions are no longer storms to avoid, but advisors you must listen to. I'm not saying the advisor is always right, but you'll fail early if you ignore them. People with strong mental resilience don't feel less than you. They just know how to use emotion as fuel. They don't suppress pain, they transform it. You feel disappointed by a result? Good. Let that disappointment remind you that you cared enough to expect more and were brave enough to risk getting hurt. And if you've got the guts, you'll use that energy to learn, to improve, to avoid repeating the mistake. You feel rage because someone left you? Good. That emotion is giving you a chance to build a value system that no one can take away. Anger can burn you down, but if you learn to hold it like fuel, it will take you further than any words of comfort. You're seeking peace? Don't start by learning how to control emotions. Start by eliminating the things that keep you from staying in control. A person surrounded by chaos, from social media, sensational news to negative people, can never keep their inner world clear, no matter how many spiritual tools they possess. I've seen smart people trapped in emotional spirals simply because they lack the courage to clean up their environment, and you're doing the same. Be honest. A clear mind cannot exist in constant noise. And noise isn't just sound, it's meaningless conversations, it's the flood of breaking news, it's the emotional whirlpools you let others create in your head. Clarity requires space, physical space, time space, human space. If you want to hear your inner voice, you must turn down the outer noise. You can't keep living in an environment that constantly stimulates your emotions and expect to achieve inner stability. That's a paradox. I once redesigned my entire work system, not to do more, but to think deeper. That's why I pay attention to every detail in my workspace. Lighting, minimalism, a blank wall, a small plant in the right place. Because I understand if the space you live in sends chaotic signals, your mind will respond in kind. And you'll think you're losing control when in fact it's the environment that's been running you all along. Not just physical space. Your calendar matters too. A person with no free space in their schedule cannot make sound decisions. If you're constantly pulled into texts, emails, and calls, you're not living by your own thought patterns. You're reacting to someone else's. And then you wonder why you feel exhausted, stuck, and lost. It's simple. You've never paused long enough to hear your own emotion. I want you to understand this clearly. Emotions don't need to be controlled. They need to be heard, understood, named correctly, and acted upon. Not from reaction, but from choice. Inner freedom doesn't come from choking emotions. It comes from learning to use them as navigation tools. When you step into the middle of an emotional wave, stand there, not hiding, not reacting, just observing. You begin to see what no one else can, the real meaning behind what you're feeling. From there, you can choose the response that aligns with the best version of yourself. You don't need to become a machine. You just need to be calm enough to see yourself reflected in the emotional mirror. And when you learn to keep your hands on the wheel, even in a storm, you don't just control direction. You control the quality of the journey. That's the strength of an adult, not the absence of emotion, but the refusal to be led by it. And if you master that, you don't just become strong, you become free. I'm telling you, no one stays mentally sharp while living in chaos. And the sad truth is, most people don't realize the very environment they've chosen is silently draining their inner power day by day. You think the problem is lack of discipline, focus, or motivation. It's not. The real issue is that you're living in an ecosystem where clarity becomes nearly impossible. How much control do you have over your thoughts if the moment you wake up, you grab your phone and let a flood of notifications, images, news, and other people's lives pour into your mind before you even remember who you are? Every time that happens, you're not just checking updates. You're chipping away at your mental strength. You're training your brain to react constantly without thinking. And then you find yourself confused, distracted, and irritated for no reason. You think it's your personality. It's not. It's a biological response to a toxic environment. I built SpaceX during years when there was almost no way back. At that time, I wasn't seeking inspiration, I was seeking clarity. And I understood one thing deeply: no clarity ever comes from chaos. Every critical decision I made was safeguarded by absolute simplicity in my surroundings. A clear desk, a quiet room, a deliberate disconnection from external noise, because I knew that in a chaotic environment, even the most correct thoughts get distorted. If you live in noise long enough, you'll begin to think you need to learn how to control your emotions. But the truth is, you don't need more control, you need to eliminate the things that keep forcing you to be in control all the time. The space you live in is not innocent, it's your second brain. A messy desk isn't just an aesthetic issue, it's a constant signal to your brain that everything is in disarray. And that affects how you think, how you make decisions, even how you perceive your self-worth. A dark, damp corner of your room filled with unused stuff doesn't just tire you, it erodes your ability to focus deeply. Every detail you neglect in your living space is a signal your brain has to process. And don't be surprised if you feel exhausted without doing anything. That's because your environment is forcing your brain to work non-stop just to maintain minimal balance. I'm not saying this to turn you into a perfectionist. I'm saying this so you understand. If you don't design an environment that supports focus, you're living like someone swimming upstream. And the exhaustion you feel every day isn't because you're weak. It's because you're constantly fighting your environment without realizing it. This doesn't only apply to physical space. It applies to time as well. If your schedule is a string of constant reactions, meetings, messages, emails, demands from others, you're not living at the speed of thought. You're living at the speed of interruption. And then you find yourself lost, irritable, and unsure of what matters. Not because you lack ability, but because you no longer have enough inner space for deep thinking. I've learned to protect blocks of silence like they're vital energy systems, because it's in those quiet moments that ideas are formed, direction is set, and the difference between an average decision and a breakthrough is born. I don't need 10 hours to make a decision, but I need 30 uninterrupted minutes to think clearly. And if you've never had a morning without notifications, an afternoon without social media, or an evening without TV, maybe you've never truly experienced clarity. In the end, who you are is not just shaped by your thoughts and emotions. You are sculpted day by day by the environment you place yourself in. If you live around negativity, you will slowly lose your sense of belief. If you live in clutter, you will normalize chaos. If your schedule leaves no room to breathe, you will forget you once had dreams. The problem isn't that you need more motivation. The problem is you're gradually losing yourself in an environment that doesn't allow you to be clear, and you can't live an extraordinary life in an ordinary ecosystem. To do something remarkable, you must first create a space where extraordinary thinking can be born. Every accomplishment I've ever built didn't start with inspiration. It started with a quiet environment, empty enough for big ideas to take root. And I believe if you're brave enough to clean up your space, physical, temporal, and social, you'll look back one day and not recognize your old self, not because you changed, but because you finally began to live as the person you were always designed to become. I'm telling you, no breakthrough thinking is ever born on a cluttered desk. And I'm not just talking about physical objects. I'm talking about the silent signals your living space sends to your brain every day. Every item you see, everything you leave untouched, though no longer used, is a background program running, occupying processing resources in your mind. You want clear thinking, sharp decisions, a clear next direction? Then first, step into the place you live and ask yourself, does this space allow me to think? Physical space and mental space are inseparable. They operate as a seamless ecosystem. A cramped room, lacking light, cluttered with excess stuff, doesn't just tire you, it drains you. It disconnects you from yourself. At SpaceX, where I demand decisions that can shape the future of the aerospace industry, we don't design offices to look pretty. We design them so the brain can operate at its highest performance. The less visual noise, the more room for strategic thinking. The fewer things to manage, the more energy for creativity. This isn't a preference, it's mental mathematics. You'd be surprised how many people live in environments that kill focus without even realizing it. A pile of unprocessed papers, a cabinet full of to-be-clean-later stuff, a corner of the room you always avoid looking at because it makes you uneasy without knowing why. All these are cognitive burdens you carry every day, and then you wonder why you feel tired, why you procrastinate, why you can't maintain coherent thought for more than 10 minutes. Don't look for answers inside your head first. Look in the space you live in. I once worked for weeks in windowless rooms just to save costs at Tesla, but I kept one rule. The space must be clean, simple, and manageable. Because when the environment is clear, your mind sharpens. When you enter a tidy place with natural light, with life, even if it's just a small plant, you don't just feel better, you activate brain regions related to calmness, intuition, and complex information processing. And in this noisy era, the ability to maintain a quiet, orderly space is a strategic advantage. If you want to think at a high level, you must create a place that allows you to do so. A desk doesn't need to be big, but it must be clean. A room doesn't need to be luxurious, but it must have atmosphere. A workspace doesn't need to be beautiful, but it must make you want to return every day. And here's my advice. Look at your living space as if it's a replica of your brain. Every unnecessary detail is an unresolved thought. Every hidden corner you avoid is a part of your mind neglected, and if you clean up that space, you'll see an almost immediate effect. Your thinking becomes clearer, your goals become more concrete, and your next actions emerge naturally. I'm not advising you to live like a monk, but I warn you, if you live like you don't need order, don't be surprised when your life lacks direction. External chaos always creeps into your internal operating system, and if you don't have a quiet place to listen to yourself, you'll live by others' voices. A podcast you hear while working, a status update you scroll past but can't stop thinking about, a conversation you unintentionally join but carry its impact hours later. That's what I see in many people. They no longer know what they're thinking because they don't have any place to truly think. Clarity doesn't come from being smarter than others. It comes from living in an environment that demands less effort to control. Simplicity is the ultimate luxury. And a clean space isn't an Instagram image to show off, but the base for strategic thinking, accurate decision-making, and ideas with long-term influence. Remember, you don't need a big house. You need a small but right space. Right lighting, right energy, right for the person you're trying to become. And when you live in such a space, you don't just think clearer, you live clearer. And when you live clearly, you start acting in ways that make things change, not because you try harder, but because you're finally thinking at the highest frequency your brain was designed to operate at. I'm telling you, if you haven't learned to manage your time, you haven't truly learned to manage your life. Because time isn't just a unit measuring productivity, it's the living chart of your spirit, showing where you invest your energy, attention, and life's value. When you say, I don't have time, you're actually saying, I haven't prioritized it enough. And if you can't master your schedule, sooner or later, you'll be swept along by someone else's agenda, living in the orbit of noise and obligation instead of freedom and choice. Most people think time management is a technique, using apps, making plans, dividing time slots, but I tell you it starts with attitude. Do you dare to block out an hour of uninterrupted time just to think? Do you dare to turn off phone notifications to focus on something truly important? Do you have the courage to say no to unnecessary meetings, messages, invitations, just to protect silent space in your calendar? Because I guarantee no big ideas were ever born in a packed schedule full of reaction. If you constantly jump from task to task, if you always feel busy but aren't clear on what you're doing, then you're not living, you're reacting. And a life lived in reaction leaves no mark. Those who create change aren't the busiest. They are the ones doing the right things at the right time with a level of focus that the modern world rarely allows. And that only happens when you start seeing time as a sacred mental space, not to fill but to respect. I have a principle. During the week, always keep at least one time block free from meetings, messages, or minor decisions. Not for rest, but for thinking. Because you can't navigate a rocket if you don't know where you're headed. Strategic thinking doesn't come from running between deadlines and emails. It only comes when you create enough distance from the outside world to listen to your inner flight path. You'd be surprised to know that most wrong decisions don't come from lack of knowledge, they come from lack of space. When you don't have enough time to pause, you don't have enough silence to reflect. And without reflection, every decision is pushed by temporary emotions, surface pressures, or others' voices. Free time, what you call wasted, is actually the breathing space of the mind. The problem isn't that you have 24 hours like everyone else, it's how much of that you've given to what you truly choose. Don't measure your life by how busy you are, measure it by how many minutes you live aligned with what you say matters. If you say family is everything, but your schedule has not even 1 hour a day solely for them, you're living against yourself. If you say creativity is the soul, but each morning you're buried under messages, updates, notifications, you're betraying your talent. I tell you, mental energy isn't drained by heavy work, it erodes by being fragmented too many times. Every time your thought stream is interrupted, you don't just lose time, you lose depth. You trade presence for speed, and you end the day feeling like you've done a lot, but haven't moved far. That's the fatigue you can't explain, because it doesn't come from your body. It comes from your soul being stretched without support. If you want to regain clarity in life, start not with goals, but with time. Cut distractions, batch small tasks together, and especially create space capsules where you can think without pressure, work without supervision, and exist without being torn apart by demands. Protecting a 90-minute block daily will bring you more peace than a vacation. And finally, I want you to remember this. Time is not a resource, it's the foundation. Everything you think, feel, become, happens in the space called time. Every second you spend on a behavior trains you to become the person corresponding to that behavior. So when you choose how to use time, you're not just organizing life. You're rewriting yourself. You're redefining who you are. And if you're serious about becoming your best version, start by protecting every hour as if it's the sole foundation of your mental life. Because in truth, it is. I'm telling you, most of the chaos inside you does not come from yourself. It comes from the people you allow closest to you. You might think you live independently, that emotions are personal matters, that your mind is a separate world, but that's an illusion. The people you interact with daily are the emotional environment you live in. You can eat clean, read good books, sleep on time, but just one wrong conversation can cloud your spirit for hours, even days. I had to learn this the hard way. Amid the harsh cycles of Tesla, SpaceX, and personal failures no one was allowed to know. When you're under life or math decisions, billions of dollars, and the future of a planet, you clearly see. The people beside you are either fuel for your intellect or a silent poison that gradually destroys the operating system you depend on to survive. Unfortunately, most people don't sort this out. They live on emotional autopilot, close to whoever is near, familiar with whoever they meet, responding to whoever speaks. They let emotions be set by social circumstances rather than proactively redesigning their mental ecosystem. I want you to face this directly. Every person you keep close carries an emotional wave. They either expand your thinking or shrink it. They either awaken firmness in you or make you doubt yourself. And the most dangerous thing isn't that they are bad, it's that they are out of sync with the frequency you're trying to maintain. Those who always talk about others instead of ideas, those who always find fault instead of solutions, those who make you feel you must shrink yourself just to maintain a fake peace. That is not peace. That's a hostile emotional environment disguised by social politeness. I'm not asking you to cut everyone out, but I'm telling you clearly, adjust the distance. You owe no one close contact if it damages your spirit. Avoiding negativity isn't coldness, it's loyalty to your own future. And remember, negativity isn't always loud. It can be subtle, delicate, like sarcasm, a skeptical glance, a small, repeated distrust. Each time, you don't just lose a burst of anger, you lose a part of your fighting will. I believe people are the most important ecosystem you must rebuild if you want to change yourself. And you don't need a crowd, you just need the right people. A timely conversation can change your mindset for months. Someone who truly listens can help you find your inner voice again. Someone who's not better than you, but always reminds you why you started. Those people don't make you doubt yourself. They make you serious with yourself. I advise you to redesign your mental circle as if choosing partners for a life or math mission, because that's exactly what you're doing. If you want strategic thinking, don't just read strategy books. Stay close to people who ask good questions. If you want to live courageously, don't just listen to speakers talk about courage. Spend time with people who live genuinely, who don't hide behind social masks, because you can't think clearly when your mind is constantly on defense. And you can't grow if every day you have to perform to survive. I've learned that a timely decision about people is worth hundreds of hours of self-development, simply because the right environment makes you grow naturally without effort. It doesn't force you to change, it gives you space to be yourself, but at your best version. So choose carefully who your mind interacts with. Social media, messages, calls, feedback, all are emotional streams flowing into your nervous system. And if you don't filter, you get poisoned. Not by shocks, but by silent exhaustion. Finally, I don't want you living to please the wrong people, then losing yourself in the process. Be honest and responsible with the human environment you maintain, because it nourishes or destroys your future self every hour, every day. And you deserve to live in an emotional environment where you don't apologize for being yourself, where you're pushed forward, not held back by polite silence. Clear thinking, strong action, and stable emotions all start with one thing: choosing again who you keep close, not with judgment, but with awareness. And that's how you rewrite yourself, not through extreme effort, but through quiet yet powerful choices. I tell you, if you don't know what your core values are, then every choice in your life is just a high-end coin toss. It might land right, it might miss, but it will never be consistent. And I don't build my career on luck. I build it on an internal frame of reference that is never allowed to be wrong. Core values. Core values are not slogans hung on walls, nor are they the phrase, "I value honesty," you say in an interview. Values are the principles you are willing to suffer loss for, willing to trade benefits to protect. They are what remain when all your titles, status, social masks are stripped away. They are your backbone. If you ignore them, you won't break immediately, but you will walk crookedly, wear down, and eventually collapse. I'm not talking about ideal ethics. I'm talking about designing the operating system inside, a survival compass, so you don't get lost when everything outside changes. When emotions fluctuate, when public opinion is chaotic, when opportunities flood in from all directions, you will have to choose. And you cannot choose well if you have nothing to rely on. Core values are the foundation for you to boldly say, "This is me," in a world that says, "Be like us." You ask me how to know what your values are? Not from a book or a self-development course, but from the very moments you feel furious, deeply hurt, or endlessly regretful. When someone deceives you and you get angry, perhaps you live for honesty. When you miss family time and feel regret, perhaps your true value is connection, not achievement. When someone tries to silence you and you fight back, perhaps you live for freedom of thought. Strong emotions don't appear randomly. They signal that something inside you is being violated. And if you dare to sit down, write 3 to 5 values you feel most clearly, then use them as filters for decisions, you will witness a miracle. You won't need to ask anyone anymore. You will no longer be lost wondering which choice is right. You just ask, does this betray my values? Let me be clear, living by values doesn't mean rigidity. On the contrary, it helps you be flexible where it doesn't matter and firm where you must not compromise. Because the world constantly changes. Markets change, people change, opportunities change. But if you don't have something immutable, you will change in the wrong direction. You will chase what's visible and praised instead of what you truly believe. Living without core values is like building a house without blueprints. You might build fast, you might paint beautifully, but over time you realize the entire internal structure is unstable. You feel insecure not because the world is against you, but because you haven't defined what you must never trade away. And once you have them, you will be surprised to see every decision become clearer, not easier, but clearer. You can refuse a large sum of money because it contradicts your values. You can walk away from a relationship because it distances you from your life principles. You can choose a slower path because it aligns with what you believe. And that's not weakness. That is true power, the power not to be shaped by the temporary. Core values are also the foundation for building deep relationships. Because you may disagree on methods, but if you share the reasons behind your actions, you can still walk together. Conversely, if values don't align, no matter how harmonious the surface appears, cracks will always exist inside. And you cannot build a long-term future on a cracked foundation. I suggest you do something that seems simple but is extremely powerful. Write a life manifesto. It doesn't need to be long or philosophical, just accurate. A short passage clearly stating what you live for, what you commit to, and what you will never do no matter what. That sentence doesn't need applause. It only needs you to read it every time you face a crossroads, to remind yourself who you are. I tell you, you don't need the world's approval. You only need a value access that never wavers. And then you will see. You can adjust strategies, update methods, change approaches, but you will never lose yourself, because you know, no matter how far you go, you are still going right. And that is the only trustworthy thing in a world full of turbulence. I tell you, if you don't learn to live with uncertainty, you will always live in confusion, even when everything seems to be going well. Because this world isn't designed to give you certainty. It is designed to test your adaptability. And anyone who lives as if they can control every variable will sooner or later be shocked when life takes an unexpected turn. I didn't build Tesla or SpaceX on certainty. I didn't wait until I knew everything would work. I only needed to know one thing: I can adapt. I can step into the unknown, learn fast, adjust precisely, and keep moving forward even without a map. And I tell you, that is a survival skill. Uncertainty itself doesn't kill you. Fear of uncertainty does. It paralyzes you, makes you react instead of choose, freezes you when you need to move. The anxiety you feel when things are unclear isn't a sign of weakness. It's your nervous system's way of searching for something to hold on to. But if you let that anxiety lead you, you'll only follow survival instincts, never achieving a breakthrough. I want you to do a simple thing. Instead of trying to get rid of the anxiety, have a dialogue with it. Ask directly, what about this situation makes me most uneasy? If that happens, what will I do? Just writing down the worst-case scenario helps you regain control. You shift from victim to planner. And then you'll see what you fear most isn't actually impossible to handle. Uncertainty only becomes terrifying when you let it remain vague in your mind. Once you write it down, question it, break it apart, you start to regain control. I want you to change one thing in your thinking. Don't wait for full clarity before acting. Act to gain clarity. That's the difference between linear thinkers and experimental thinkers. Life doesn't operate like an equation. It operates as a chain of feedback loops. You don't need to guess everything right. You just need to move, observe, adjust, then repeat the cycle. Every imperfect step gives you real data, while endless guessing only gives you illusions. I train my teams by this principle: always prepare multiple scenarios. Not because I'm pessimistic, but because I'm practical. I don't let myself live only with an ideal version of the future. I ask, if things go well, what will I do? If things are average, how will I adjust? And if things go badly, how will I pivot? That's not pessimism, that's action wisdom. And I want you to develop that ability. Live alongside multiple possibilities while keeping an active mindset. Let me be very clear. Flexibility is not a sign of lacking direction. Flexibility is a sign of not being stuck in illusions. A person who can change perspective, change plans, even start over, not because they don't know what they're doing, but because they know. The only constant in the universe is change. You don't have to cling to old beliefs just to protect your ego. You need enough humility to relearn, and those who can relearn are never left behind. What keeps me going when everything is uncertain is what I call a confidence memory. I recall times I have faced uncertainty and still moved forward. I don't need anyone to tell me I'll be okay. I just remind myself, I didn't know before, but I still made it through. That kind of confidence is deeper than encouragement. It's a tested truth, and you can build that memory too, by not waiting for everything to be clear before stepping in, but by stepping in and letting experience teach you. Finally, I want you to understand this: uncertainty is not the enemy, it's the space for true creativity. If everything were certain, life would just be a boring repetition. It's precisely because you don't know what will happen that every step you take carries deep personal meaning. Every decision you make is a declaration of the person you choose to become, and nothing is more powerful than that. I don't live by a map, I live by principles, and one of my greatest principles is you don't need to know everything to start. You just need to start, listen to feedback, adjust, then move on. And that chain of actions will shape you, not the way you imagine, but the way you truly live. I tell you, there's no tool more powerful than the feedback loop if you want to become excellent. Not smarter, not more creative, but more accurate, day by day, decision by decision, action by action. I don't need you to be right from the start. I need you to be brave enough to step in, aware enough to observe, honest enough to assess, and flexible enough to adjust. That's the entire mechanism of progress. And I don't watch it from afar, I live in it. I design everything from how we develop rockets to how we build teams around the feedback loop. I've seen many smart people make the same mistake. They judge decisions based on emotion or short-term success. They don't understand that a high-quality decision isn't one that makes you feel safe in the moment, but one that holds up over time through testing, through ruthless reality. And if you don't verify every action with real-world data, you're living in illusion. Every decision is a hypothesis. I don't care how certain you are. If you haven't acted, you have nothing. A hypothesis only becomes knowledge when you're willing to act, accept feedback, and use that feedback to upgrade yourself. Those who do nothing never fail, but they never grow either. The first step is action, because thinking without acting is just floating theory. When you step in, you generate data. You find out what in your plan actually works, what was just a hopeful guess. You find out who in your team actually performs and who only talks well. You see yourself clearly, facing failure, facing ambiguity, choosing between what's right and what's easy. After action comes evaluation, and this is where most people fail. They evaluate to find someone to blame or to prove they were right. That kind of evaluation is useless. I don't evaluate to protect my ego. I evaluate to find the truth. I look at the outcome, the process, and my inner response. I don't ask, was I right? I ask, what did I learn? What did I miss? What do I need to change to move forward stronger? The hardest part of the feedback loop is adjustment, because adjusting means admitting that what you once believed, defended, were proud of, might now be outdated. Many are willing to redo plans, but very few are willing to deconstruct themselves. They fear that admitting mistakes will diminish their value. But I tell you, real value isn't how often you're right, it's how often you're willing to change to become more right. I'm not afraid of being wrong, I'm afraid of learning nothing from being wrong. And I don't keep decisions just because I once believed in them, I keep what's still true. I discard what's no longer true. That's why SpaceX can fail multiple times and still move forward. Every explosion is a lesson paid in full, but its value lies in how we learn from it, not avoid it. You can't use the feedback loop halfway. If you only listen to pleasant feedback, you're living in a self-created illusion. If you only listen to feedback from the world without self-observation, you become an echo, not a creator. The loop must include introspection. You must learn to monitor yourself. What emotion is driving your action? What fear makes you avoid the truth? What pride prevents you from adjusting your course? To make the feedback loop truly work, you need stillness, not to escape life, but to hear the rhythm of your own life. If you live in constant noise, you can't see the pattern shaping you, and you'll keep repeating old mistakes just in new forms. The feedback loop isn't just for work, it's a way of life. In relationships, you must observe how you communicate, react, how the other feels. In health, you must listen to your body, adjust your routine by its response. In finances, you must track your cash flow, see what's pulling you off course, and in yourself, you must face the feedback about the person you are becoming. I want you to remember this. You don't need to be right from the beginning. You only need to be clear-headed enough not to repeat the same old mistakes. And every time you adjust, you're not just improving results, you're sharpening your thinking, more precise, more honest, more effective. You can't control everything, but you can build a system where learning never stops. And that system is called the feedback loop. It's what makes you powerful, not because you've never failed, but because you never stay with the same mistake too long. And that's enough to outpace 99% of people who only think but never dare to revise. I'm telling you, every decision you make, even the smallest ones that seem invisible, is a silent vote for the person you're becoming. You may think it's just a temporary choice, a trivial act, but the truth is, every action lays a brick in the deepest structure of your character. No one becomes excellent overnight. They become that way through hundreds of right decisions, repeated, consistent, and tireless. And on the other hand, a person doesn't lose their essence, ethics, or credibility from a single mistake, but by making the wrong choices too many times without stopping. I don't care what you achieve today, if your daily decisions only aim for what's easy, convenient, or comfortable. That's not the path to inner strength. That's the path of subtle corruption, when you compromise with yourself and call it flexibility. Every time you lie to avoid trouble, every time you silently dodge responsibility, every time you postpone important work just to feel safe for a moment, you're voting against your own strength. Strong people aren't those who never make mistakes. They are those who understand that they are building a life system where every decision has accumulated consequences. And if you don't live with high self-awareness, one day you'll wake up in a familiar body, but your soul will be drained by countless small compromises. I've seen many intelligent people live without discipline. They have vision, they have talent, but they give themselves permission to make impulsive, unstructured decisions. They think they're living freely, but in reality, they're being led by momentary desires, fleeting emotions, and other people's expectations. And the tragic part is, they don't even realize it. That's why I always return to one core question: who is this decision turning me into? When I get angry, I don't just ask if my anger is justified. I ask, if I react this way, what kind of person am I reinforcing in myself? When I'm facing procrastination, I don't just ask whether I deserve a break. I ask, if I allow myself to avoid this today, how much easier will it be to quit tomorrow? You might say, it's just once. But character doesn't need many cracks to slide downward. One time is enough to open the door. The problem isn't the wrong decision itself. The problem is not having a clear internal reference system to know what's wrong. If you don't know what you truly believe in, what you live for, then every choice is just a reaction without direction. I advise you to write down your core values, not to hang them on a wall, but so that when you face a difficult choice, you have a standard of measurement. You don't need many, just 3 to 5 values that you commit never to betray, even when no one is watching. Every time you make a decision, compare it with those values. If it matches, go for it. If not, stop, no matter how tempting it is. That's how you protect yourself without needing armor. I don't believe you need to be perfect, but I do believe you need to be consistent, because if you keep changing your principles according to your moods, you'll never achieve real confidence. Sustainable confidence doesn't come from skill, it comes from inner stability, knowing that no matter how the world changes, you still live true to what must never change, values. And finally, I want you to understand this. What you leave behind for the world isn't just work, projects, or property. It's the impact you create in every interaction. When someone walks away from a conversation with you, what will they remember? The feeling of being heard, the feeling of being judged, the feeling of being uplifted or brought down. Those feelings, even if unintentional, are the legacy you leave behind every single day. You don't have to be a genius to leave a mark. You just need to be consistent in what you choose. Not a speech to inspire others, but the way you live when no one is watching. Not heroic acts, but the hundreds of silent decisions you still make right. Because in the end, people won't remember what you said, you believed. They'll remember what you lived, as if you believed. And that's why I say, every decision, no matter how small, is a vote for the person you are building each day. Don't waste it. I'm telling you, Legacy isn't what you leave behind after you die. It's what you're writing every single day, by the way you live, by the decisions you think no one notices, by the attitude you show when things no longer go your way. I don't need you to become a celebrated legend. I need you to understand that what you do today, repeated consistently, is how the world will remember you. Not through fame, not through medals, but through the feeling you leave behind after every presence. Some think legacy is something grand, a great company, a world-changing invention, but I see it differently. To me, legacy doesn't begin with a resume. It begins with a silent commitment you keep with yourself. The way you treat someone who has nothing to offer in return. The way you speak to someone when you want nothing from them. The way you act when no one is watching, when no one expects, when no spotlight is on. That's where every real legacy begins. I've met thousands of talented people, some of them very famous, but only a few left a true impression on me. Not because they were the best, but because they were consistent. They lived what they believed, in both ease and difficulty. They didn't need an audience to choose the right path. They lived as if character was the only thing worth protecting, not reputation, not image, not short-term results. I want you to understand this. Every action you repeat creates momentum. If you choose kindness day after day, even if no one sees it, you're becoming someone others can trust. If you choose integrity, even at a cost, you're building a core that time can't break. And if you choose authenticity, even when judged, you're sending out a silent but powerful message. I am me, no paint needed. Reputation is what people say about you. Legacy is what they feel after being around you. Reputation can be bought, staged, even faked. But legacy can't. Because it's built on tiny, unglamorous details like how you listen, how you keep promises, how you stand up when you're wrong and don't shift blame. Those things, people might not remember them with words, but they'll always remember them with emotion. I don't live to be praised, I live to do what's right. If someone learns anything from what I do, I hope it's the lesson of having the courage to live truthfully, not by the crowd's standards, not by the molds others created, but by your nature, if you have the discipline to listen to it every day. That's what makes you different, and different in the right way. You might not have much money, you might not be famous, but you can still leave a profound mark in someone's heart just by living by your values without compromise. You can still leave behind trust, admiration, inspiration, not because you know how to impress, but because you know how to hold your ground when others give up. I don't think you need to build an empire to leave a legacy, but I know for sure that if you repeat enough right, honest, and consistent choices, you'll create something time can't erase, an identity. And from that identity, someone will learn, someone will be inspired, someone will realign themselves. That is true legacy, not what you leave behind, but how you make others want to live better. And don't get it twisted. This doesn't need to be announced. You don't need to write a life mission statement. You just need to live it long enough for others to feel it, even if you never say a word. Like a compass, quiet, humble, yet everyone near it finds their direction. I leave you with one question. If someone lived near you for a month, what about your way of living would stay with them? Not your skills, but your clarity, your kindness, your trustworthiness, your honesty. And if you're not there yet, then start again. No need for a grand reason, just one new decision, repeated. True legacy doesn't come from what you declare, it comes from what you choose, day after day. No audience, no applause, just you, never forgetting who you want to become. And if you never lose sight of that, you've already left something greater than fame, a living example.